Hello, everybody. The rush to escape the Taliban continues this morning in Afghanistan. There are still huge crowds of people outside Kabul airport as people try to get a flight out of the country. NATO confirmed today that 12 people have died either by stampede or gunshot. The latest RAF flight carrying both British and Afghan citizens arrived back in the UK in the early hours of this morning. Let's speak to our Middle East correspondent, Ali Bunkle, who's standing by for us this morning. So the airlift continues, Ali, but one wonders for how much longer?
Yeah, I mean, that is the great worry, that the Taliban now control the city of Kabul, and to that effect, they've control the roads in and out of the airport, and it might be that at any point they decide they want their international airport back and they want to take control of that crossing in and out of the country. Now, we know that there is dialogue going on between the British and the Americans and the Taliban, both, the Defence Secretary who you're about to speak to told you this last time he interviewed you. He was using Qatar as an interlocutor to talk to the Taliban, but actually we know that the British forces on the ground are now stationed literally some meters away, so either side of barbed wire from the Taliban. And so there is an element of communication going on pretty much face to face, which, I mean, it's just extraordinary when you consider that they've spent 20 years as enemies. They are now managing to create some sort of communication in order to process anyone wanting to leave the country. But it is messy, it is incredibly chaotic, and it is deeply sad. Now, look, we're going to show you some pictures that I should warn you are very distressing, but they do highlight just in the most bluntest of ways, how desperate people are to get themselves and their family members out of the country. And this is one of the fences on the outskirts of Kabul International Airport, and you see people passing their children over the fence to British and American soldiers. They are that desperate to get out of Afghanistan that they are willing to give up their children so that they can go to safety, that they can go to a better life, a life that is not living under the Taliban. And I think if you want any kind of illustration as to how desperate these people are, it cannot become starker than that. And on the other side of the fence, let's not forget that you have, in many cases, very young men and women, British soldiers, men and women, who are having to not just witness these scenes, but in so many cases every single day make decisions over who is allowed to board a flight and who is sent back into Kabul and whatever fate awaits them. And that is an extremely difficult and upsetting task for the British Armed Forces to be making, but they are doing so, and they are processing as many as they can to get onto flights. But they will not be able to take everybody out of the country who wants to. Some people don't have a legitimate reason to do so, but you can just see here just how many thousands want to get on one of those flights. They don't care where they go. They don't care whether they go to America or the UK or elsewhere in Europe or elsewhere in the world. They just want to leave Kabul.
OK, for now, Alistair, thanks. Have a listen to what the Secretary of State for Defence has to say. Ben Wallace is joining us again now. Hello to you, Mr Wallace. Thank you, as usual, for joining us on the programme. We do appreciate it. We understand how many challenges you're facing at the moment. Let's start with your understanding of the latest situation on the ground. The Taliban do seem to be tightening their grip. Women, eyewitnesses are telling us that women are throwing their babies over razor wire to British soldiers. What's your understanding?
So, first of all, the Taliban are letting through our people to the processing centre. So there is, I read some earlier reports today that in the media that wasn't the case. It is the case. So the plus side is the Taliban, the work that's been done on the ground, they have allowed our people through. And that is obviously good news for both our Afghan friends, but also for any entitled personnel, British passport holders, etc. The challenge is obviously they're letting everyone through, and that's why you're seeing these crowd issues at the different gates around the airport. At 6:30 this morning, I spoke to our commander on the ground there, it is very, very difficult for those soldiers, as you've seen in your own footage, dealing with some desperate, desperate people, many of whom are just wanting to leave the country. And you see, obviously, that our soldiers are having to deal with crowd control, which is a different type of threat than an enemy threat or a security threat. So we're finding our way through that. We're getting through it. We reinforced yesterday with another company of soldiers flown in to make sure that the public order was held at bay. We are in a process that is more mature than some of the other countries. And so we are bringing people forward, calling them forward. The ARAP scheme, that's the scheme that we started back in April. That's a much more mature scheme. People are getting through, they're getting on the planes, and we will fly them out. The other thing is we are not sending out any empty planes. We haven't sent out a single empty plane so far. If we have any spare capacity at any stage, we make sure we share it with other nations to fly out their key personnel, such as we flew out some NATO personnel and some of the NATO interpreter Afghans for them to make sure that not a single seat is wasted, and we're coordinating with the other countries.
OK, let's plough through some of my other questions, if I may. First of all, very quickly, what's happening to the babies that are being taken by the squaddies?
I don't know. I mean, in the footage, I've seen them. If they are families that are coming through as a whole, they will come through. Right now, as we're speaking, I think we're loading up 120 families onto a plane to depart. Another 138, only a few hours later, will be rolling through that process. We have, it's a 24-hour airport now for military planes, and they're getting through. Obviously, we can't just take a minor on their own, and it is difficult. But you'll find, as you see in the footage, I think you're showing now, the child is taken. That will be because the family will be taken as well, and it'll be their challenge trying to make it through that crowd. We are finding other ways of dealing with that, but that is what's happening. Let's
plough on, if I may, please, Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
We can also see that lots of these squaddies are, little more than children themselves. The diplomats shipped out. You are sending youngsters in to try to deal with life and death decisions. Is that fair?
Well, look, two things. Everyone in that chain is having a very distressful time, because whether you're the person who has to front up to an Afghan family and say you're not eligible, or you weren't part of the British scheme, that's going to be tough. And then obviously the soldiers doing public duty have to absolutely deal with the people that approach them, and that is also tough. I don't think there isn't an alternative where I can keep soldiers away from the public. That is the mission they're on. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we disappoint as few people as possible. And through the night, last night, my minister and the junior ministers in the other departments have been working to try and speed up what we call the back office process. That's receiving the names from the crisis hub, making sure they're processed and screened as quickly as possible, so that there's almost no delay when they turn up at the airport. That is the key. There are things to rule out. We're going to do that. And I change it every hour. If we have to change something, we'll change it. OK, Mr. Wallace, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a lot to get through. Do you agree with your Chief of the Defence Staff yesterday, who told me on this programme that the Taliban, I quote him, are a group of country boys who live by a code of honour? Well, the Taliban are clearly a military force. They have their own discipline sets. I'm not saying that in a way that, and nor was the Chief of Defence Staff, there was any admiration for those people in that sense. But we're also trying to deal with the facts on the ground. My local commanders on the ground have engaged the local Taliban. I'm sorry, Mr. Wallace. My question specifically is about what the Chief of the Defence Staff, not on the ground here, he says they are a group of country boys who live by a code of honour and that they have changed. Doesn't look like that from eyewitness reports that we're reading in the newspapers this morning. I think he also said that he will see if they change. Look, we are where we are. The Taliban are running the country. You're defending him, Mr. Wallace. Yeah, of course I'm defending him. Look, Nick Carter knows more than I'll ever know about Afghanistan and the Taliban, and more than most people. He is a deeply experienced general, both as a general before he was a general serving in Afghanistan. And when he says things, we should listen and we should value it. He is my advisor, the Prime Minister's advisor, and he is absolutely right in some of his observations about where we were going. And he is right that a lot of the Taliban don't come from the sophisticated part of the Afghanistan. They may come from country the countryside and not be as sophisticated as some of the previous political class. But that doesn't mean to say that the Taliban are not running the country. They're running the country. We have to deal with that as we may. We're obviously not recognising them as a government at the moment, but we have to locally engage them.
OK, let's talk about your Foreign Secretary instead then, should we? If he had made a call from his Crete Sun lounger last Friday to his Afghan counterpart, which the US opposite number did, then more interpreters would have been out of that country by now, wouldn't they?
Okay, I like you, have read the front of the newspaper today. I have absolutely no idea about what my Foreign Secretary or anyone else's secretary's call sheet is like. What I do know is that at no stage in the last few weeks have I had a problem with the Foreign Secretary or anyone else in that department in making sure we can process, get people through. The facts are changing rapidly on the ground. As he said yesterday in Parliament, he's managed to do all his calls when he needed to, his COBRA calls, etc.
He didn't, Mr. Wallace. He didn't. He didn't call. He didn't call it, and he's admitted it. The Foreign Office has admitted this on the front page of the paper today. They admitted that he didn't make the call to his Afghan counterpart. You know the diplomacy in that part of the world. It has to be on a similar level of diplomat or of politician in order to make things happen. He said he was too busy. The Americans weren't too busy, and a lot of their interpreters, they've managed to get to the airport in good time. Ours are now sheltering in place and can't get there.
Look, Kay, one phone call is not the reason we are where we are at the moment. And I don't even know if that phone call deal didn't happen, because all we have is a media speculative front page about it. What I will say very clearly...
It's very dismissive of you, Mr. Wallace.
I'm not being dismissive, Kay. What I'm saying is, the idea I'm focused on one front page of a newspaper at 6:30 in the morning, when my constituents and you as a taxpayer expect me to be dealing with the problem on the ground.
I'm not you didn't know about it before now. Surely you must have been in conversation with the Foreign Secretary.
Yes, I have. He's taken my calls. I've been
sat next door but one to him yesterday.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I've had no problem, Kay, in dealing with the Foreign Secretary or the Foreign Office throughout this process. We have lent in, we have dealt with the issues as they were presented. And I think the other thing that we should point out, as we know, is that that Afghan government, the one that melted away pretty quickly, I'm not sure how much leverage they had on the ground anyhow at that particular moment in time, because that was not the challenges I was facing. At that time, last Friday, those were not the problems and the barriers for us getting people out. The problems, if you remember, and you reported on it, was about whether we could get the airport open and whether people could be using the airport as the Taliban advanced. That was
and
the block
our brave soldiers are doing their level best, and there is no criticism for their work here, certainly. Let me ask you about the criticism for your Prime Minister, though. You were in the House of Commons, as I said yesterday. Your former brothers in arms absolutely savaged him. How difficult was it for you, sitting there, listening to all of that?
Well, look, it wasn't difficult for any of us listening to what is quite rightly a real outpouring of anger, frustration and sadness about what we are seeing on the ground in Afghanistan. And, some of that anger is vented towards all of us. I get pretty unpleasant emails from lots of people every day about these sort of things. I understand why. I understand, the deep disappointment of what happened over the last 2 years and the Doha Agreement. People wanted to say, and if you go over the debate today again, if you have the time to listen to it again, you'll realise that a lot of that debate was people expressing their deep frustration and fear that we have a different world than we did, that we all took for granted. And, I didn't hear alternative solutions from anybody, including my colleagues who were criticising us, except one, as some of our colleagues suggested, that the British go back in again as an army. I don't think anyone feels sending unilaterally a single force in of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of troops would be the right solution now.
Okay.
But apart from that, there was long on criticism and very short on solutions. And
let me ask you one final question before I let you go. I'm sorry to rush you. You say that we didn't know what was going to happen last week, or last Sunday in Afghanistan, in Kabul in particular. The US president...
I didn't say that. I said on last Friday...
Yeah.
Okay, I said last Friday.
Okay, last Friday then. Okay, let's go with last Friday.
Okay, I said last Friday, the barrier to what we were doing.
Just need to ask you this final question before I let you go. The US president has been subject to quite a lot of criticism as well. He said that he expected the chaos that we're seeing at the airport as a result of the Taliban moving in so quickly, and he factored that into his decision-making. Did we?
Yeah, but did we? Yes, we always knew. So what you're seeing now, Operation Pitting, wasn't made up last week, Kay. It was made up. We worked it out, planned it at this April. So, we didn't just send our troops in sort of on a random plan. It was a plan. We made the plan. Okay. The only question was always,
why didn't we take the interpreters to the airport earlier? Why didn't we get them there earlier? Why didn't we say to people who needed to come to the UK, come because we know there's going to be chaos?
Okay, before the chaos that we saw at the airport, we'd taken out nearly 2,000. So we had been doing that.
Tens of thousands.
There'd been a long, steady stream of families and Afghan interpreters coming to this country. We're now over 3,000 with people with their families. But since April to literally last weekend, we were taking a steady stream. We were changing the rules. We were waiving requirements. So we'd taken, I think it was 1,800, 1,900 out alone by the time we got to last Friday.
Many, many thousands still left behind.
Yep, but we are processing it through. We'll call forward nearly 2,000 over the next few days.
OK, good to talk to you. I'll have to let you go. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Wallace.
Bye-bye.
Again,
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. What is life like under the Taliban? At 7:30, we'll speak to Pashtani Durrani in Afghanistan, whose charity tries to get girls into education. What's happening now? 7:40, Dr. Shola and Scotty Nell Hughes will both be with us. They'll be talking to us about Joe Biden's speech and who he's blaming, who he isn't. And a month since Freedom Day, is the wedding industry starting to recover? The latest RAF flight carrying British and Afghan nationals arrived at RAF Brize Norton overnight. Charlotte Lomas has the latest from there now. Hello to you, Charlotte. We're just hearing there from the Defence Secretary, almost another 300 people heading your way.
Exactly, Kay. Good morning to you. More flights arriving here at RAF Brize Norton every day. We understand from the Prime Minister that they are aiming to evacuate 1,000 British nationals and Afghans here every day. We haven't got the precise numbers from the Ministry of Defence, but you heard Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, just saying that 120 families are on a plane heading to the UK and 2,000 more over the next couple of days. There is another question mark, though, as to how long the British troops have to evacuate everyone. So far, there hasn't been any resistance from the Taliban to the Allied withdrawal. But the worry is, or the question is, how long will that continue? So there is pressure to make this evacuation obviously as quick as possible. And for those Afghan nationals who do arrive back in here, they do manage to escape the Taliban, what then? The question is, what will happen to them when they come back to the UK? Where will they go? They do face an uncertain future as they try to integrate into new homes and new communities.
OK, Charlotte, thank you. A man believed to be the last surviving Khmer Rouge leader is due in court this morning. 90-year-old Kiyu Samphan is appealing against his conviction for genocide. Our Southeast Asia correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, joining us now from Bangkok. Hello to you, Siobhan. Tell us more about what's going to happen today.
Yes, so the court is already underway. Kusapon is in court, and he is the last living leader of the Khmer Rouge. He was in Pol Pot's inner circle, and you'll remember that the Khmer Rouge ruled Cambodia with an iron fist between 1975 and 1979. They're accused of crimes including genocide, torture, rape, slavery, murder, crimes against humanity. And Kusapon is in court because he's been appealing a conviction from 2018 where he was convicted of genocide against Vietnamese. He's been appealing that all week. He's been sitting in court, the 90-year-old, and later today he's expected to actually address the court as this appeal hearing draws to a close. Now, we're not expecting a judgment today. What we are expecting is final a wrapping up of this very long-running procedure. And this tribunal has actually been running for 15 years. He's just a part of it. Even if the conviction is overturned, and we don't expect an announcement on that until 2022, it's worth noting that he was already convicted and is serving life in prison for other crimes against humanity. But this is a very important moment for many Cambodians. 1.7 million Cambodians died during that rule of the Khmer Rouge, and this is a moment for them to watch some sort of justice being brought against the former leaders.
OK, for now, thank you. Hospitals in Haiti say they are running short of food and medical supplies in the wake of Saturday's earthquake. More than 2,000 people are now known to have died in the disaster. 2 vaccine doses is still the most effective way to ensure protection against the Delta variant of coronavirus. Researchers from Oxford University concluded both the Pfizer and AstraZeneca jabs offer a similar level of protection after 4 to 5 months. A US prosecutor has told a jury that R&B singer R. Kelly is a predator whose fame brought him access to girls, boys and young men. The 3-time Grammy winner has pleaded not guilty to charges of racketeering, sexual abuse and bribery. Officials in California say another major wildfire has broken out 80 miles from San Francisco. Firefighters say forests planted to help combat climate change are likely to be destroyed. And you can keep up with all the stories affected by the global climate on the Daily Climate Show right here on Sky News every weekday, 6:30 and 9:30. For the thousands of Afghans living in Britain, the seizure of power by the Taliban is deeply troubling. Most still have family living in Afghanistan and are struggling to stay in touch with them. Our Scotland correspondent James Matthews visited a British Afghan community in Glasgow.
There's a corner of Glasgow that is forever Afghanistan, when United take the field. Glasgow Afghan United are a team created by refugees, today with one eye on the action in the place and on the close relatives they left behind.
My grandfather and my grandmother are in the middle of war and they're scared with the rest of their family, my uncles and my aunties.
One of my main worries is about the women's rights and the fear of the people who do not have any power or any self-confidence of going outside and doing their normal day-to-day jobs.
The team is run by Abdul Bastani, who fled Afghanistan 20 years ago. He doesn't worry for his young family here, but for the relatives hunkered down in Kabul.
Everything is wrong.
On the phone from the Afghan capital, his younger brother told of people being taken away from their homes in the night.
That door was knocked and some people had came from Taliban. They asked these people and took them away.
They are taking people's car, they are taking people's empty houses. Lots of people have fled, left the country, so the houses has been taken by the Taliban, and it is so difficult and terrifying to see what is happening.
Britain and America decided to go to Afghanistan.
In Glasgow, this was a gathering organised in solidarity with the people of Afghanistan. It should be said that views do vary here on events. Wahid Totakil is the chairman of the Scottish Afghan Society, a registered charity. He's also a supporter of the Taliban takeover.
Afghanistan's safe than Europe now.
Why are people hanging onto aeroplanes to try to escape?
There's not not all Afghanistan people to behind of the airplane. There's 100 or 200 or 500 people. They listen to the America and Canada news. They said we take 30,000 Afghans to Canada, and they said, oh, they take, and they went to the airplane.
It's clear the uncertainty of the situation in Afghanistan has some way to play out. As it does, it resonates far from there. Here, too, they fear the endgame. James Matthews, Sky News, Glasgow.
Doing the best they can to relax while they wait to hear word of their relatives still stuck in Kabul and greater Afghanistan. What's happening here as far as the weather is concerned? Kirsty is standing by for us this morning. Good morning, Kirsty. Tell me more.
Good morning, Kay. Well, for many of us, it's another case of more cloudy skies, fairly damp conditions as well this morning, a few spits and spots of rain and drizzle. There are signs things will warm up this weekend, but unfortunately, we've got a weather front moving in as well.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. It's a grey and damp start for many with spits and spots of light rain and drizzle. It will be a very different feeling day for parts of central and eastern Scotland and northeast England. After yesterday's warm sunshine, it's cloudy skies and spots of rain and noticeably cooler as well. We've got some showery rain pushing its way from eastern Ireland into Wales, later on into central parts of England. And some of these showers that develop this afternoon could be on the heavy side. For most, though, we're just slowly watching the cloud and hoping it might break up a little bit. So perhaps a few glimmers of afternoon sunshine, but just bear in mind there could be a few heavy showers around. Those will fade tonight. Much of Britain largely dry, if cloudy, with some hill fog. Rain, though, pushing in across Ireland, and this rain will push its way northeastwards on Friday.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
We all need a bit of levity, don't we? Let's check up on Wally, should we? He said, little monkey. He's been spotted again, this time using a speedboat as his own personal sofa off the coast of West Cork in Ireland. It's the latest sighting as he continues what's turning into a 2,500-mile trip around Europe. There he is, 800 kilos of him. He's using boats to take naps, which can last several days. There he is, just relaxing in his own personal speedboat. Good on him. Coming up in just a few moments' time, we'll return to the situation on the ground in Afghanistan. President Biden facing criticism on all sides over his decision to withdraw US troops. We'll discuss that with Dr. Shola, and also Scotty Nell Hughes is with us. Do stay tuned. Morning again, everybody. The Defence Secretary says conditions in Kabul for British soldiers are very difficult. The rush to escape the Afghan capital continues this morning. NATO says 12 people have died, either by stampede or gunshots around the airport. Ben Wallace told me that, for the time being, the Taliban are allowing people to go to the airport.
The Taliban are letting through our people to the processing centre. So there is, I read some earlier reports today that in the media that wasn't the case. It is the case. So the plus side is the Taliban, the work that's been done on the ground, they have allowed our people through, and that is obviously good news for both our Afghan friends, but also for any entitled personnel, British passport holders, etc. The challenge is obviously they're letting everyone through, and that's why you're seeing these crowd issues at the different gates around the airport. At 6:30 this morning, I spoke to our commander on the ground there. It is very, very difficult for those soldiers, as you've seen in your own footage, dealing with some desperate people.
Tamara's with us this morning. Hello to you, Tamara. He did say about another 300 people or thereabouts are about to take off to come to a new life in the UK, but so many more not.
That's right. And Ben Wallace said that in response to reports that some of these planes are leaving half full, he said that was not the case, that the Taliban are, if anything, allowing too many people through. So you have these distressing scenes at the airport where people who don't have the right paperwork are being turned away. And he says where there is spare capacity on planes, they've given it to other countries or to NATO personnel who we've brought back. So he says it is all proceeding smoothly, but of course, up against the clock, with the ambassador saying we've got days and not weeks.
And he backed his man, didn't he? Nick Carter, when we were talking about, he says that they're a group of country boys and they're to be trusted.
Yes, and a lot of coverage in the papers today of that interview with Nick Carter, who is regarded as an expert in the region. He's been brokering peace talks between Afghan leaders over the past year, saying perhaps the Taliban have changed, perhaps they're not engaging in medieval behaviour anymore. That will be horrifying to many, particularly women who are stuck in Afghanistan in fear. But Ben Wallace said when he speaks, we should listen, and he is someone who understands the situation on the ground.
Just a quick thought. We're about to do an interview in the United States. Biden has been heavily criticised for saying, we knew this was going to happen. What's the problem? And Ben Wallace saying, yeah, we knew too.
Yes, it seems that leaders are trying to have it both ways. Boris Johnson yesterday saying, we didn't foresee this, but then we did foresee it as well. So I think that is the subject of a lot of criticism. Of course, how did the intelligence get it so wrong, or why did political leaders ignore that intelligence? And in the debate yesterday, I think probably Joe Biden took more criticism than the Prime Minister for failing to act with other NATO allies to make sure that this chaos could, to some extent, be averted. But the message from Ben Wallace was very much that MPs were long on criticism and short on solutions. None of them want to send troops back there, and therefore there was very little, he says, that they offered in terms of alternatives.
OK. Tomorrow's take at 9 o'clock.
See you then.
Looking forward to it. Thanks very much indeed. Meantime, let's talk about President Biden, that speech he made earlier on in the week and the criticism that he received as a result. Dr. Shola and Scotty will be with us in just a second, but first this.
I don't think it could have been handled in a way that we're going to go back in hindsight and look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happened.
So for you, that was always priced into the decision?
Yes.
Was it, though? Well, buckle up. Dr. Shola and Scotty are here. Scotty's shaking her head. Morning. You start then, Scotty.
Well, that's the thing. It's such a shame to hear the president of the United States absolutely say that he priced in the chaos while he's on vacation. And he comes and he speaks and he addresses not only the United States, but the world as people are dying while he's left more than 10,000 Americans in Afghanistan right now, unable to get home, unable to get to safety. And he says he priced that in. I think this has been an absolute failure. And I think right now there's never been more damage done to the United States and our reputation on the global scale to protect our allies and to help than what has been done in the last 2 weeks. And it's not one of those, it's a failure of our intelligence. Our intelligence told the president and this administration, they just failed to listen. And I think there should be some quick investigations into how America got it so wrong in their withdrawal process. We all agree that the United States needed to get out of the area. I think all of us did. 20 years is way too long. But how this has been handled has been of such poor judgment. I don't even think people in Joe Biden's own party can defend it.
OK. Dr. Shola, how difficult is it to defend the Democrat president?
There is no defending the indefensible as far as I'm concerned. And I say this as one who supports Joe Biden's presidency. As far as I'm concerned, the execution of the Afghanistan withdrawal is totally on Joe Biden. Don't get me wrong. I totally get that Joe Biden has been boxed in by Trump's own policy. The fact that in this past few years, the Taliban were empowered by the weakness of America on the ground. Trump pulled out thousands of troops. Trump was the one that demanded that 5,000 Taliban prisoners be released. All of these decisions that were made all aided what we find today. But there is no denying that the withdrawal was on and is on Joe Biden's watch. So the utter chaos we're seeing is on his watch. As far as I'm concerned, it was preventable. It was avoidable. And when Scotty talks about, oh, this just shows a great weakness. No, I don't doubt that better judgment should have been applied. But please, this thing happened overnight. This is taking 4 years to get here. So whatever we're seeing today, as far as I'm concerned, Afghans who have supported and helped Americans on the ground, they must not be left behind. This must not be a case of America using and dumping people once again. Americans who are still in Afghanistan should be pulled out safely. What we must see right here with the UK, with the US and its allies, is that they must pay the price for going into Afghanistan, for turning the country into what it is today, because they all contributed to it. And we must understand that this is important. We cannot leave allies behind. And all those Afghans, journalists, activists, women, young girls, so many of them risk their lives to help Americans, help British people on the ground.
OK, let's bring in Scotty. Scotty, to what extent does President Trump have to accept some responsibility? He held up a big sign saying, "Dear Taliban, we're coming out before the 11th of September."
Absolutely. He actually posted that he wanted to make sure that the American soldiers were pulled out, but there's a complete difference to how Trump would handle it. But I'm actually going to back it up past Trump. I'm going to actually put this in the fact of President Obama in the 8 years that he was in office, in the chaos. Let's remember, President Obama pulled troops out. He released prisoners. He sent troops back in. This is not just for one president, Republican or Democrat. This all the way goes back to the very beginning. And the reason why we said that we were going into Afghanistan in the first place, this has been used as a major moneymaker for the contractors, the industrial military complex that totally reeks and has such a fierce hold in Washington, D.C. They have just thrown money at it, thrown weapons at it. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is going to be all of that money on weaponry and machinery and all of the things that cause mass destruction. We literally just left it for the terrorists, for our enemies who we've been fighting, which is not only insulting to those families and those soldiers who lost loved ones over there in the last 20 years, but it's very scary to know what's going to happen in the future, how emboldened they are, especially when you have countries like China that are already saying, we are going to recognize the Taliban as equal, and other countries stepping up and saying, you know what, we'll actually do trade with them. This is not the type of government that is going to be just trade focused, going to try to build itself economically. We're already seeing the horror in the street. But how the world is going to deal with it, I know one thing they're going to do. They're not going to rely on the United States next time to try to handle the peace in that in that region.
Shola?
Well, let me just add this. I think it's all well and good if we want to go all the way back, but if you're going to go all the way back, you should go all the way to the beginning from Bush and Blair up till today. I think that the point here is that we find that with Western allies, the moment they lose strategic interest in a country, they dump that country faster than you can say the country's name, and that's what's happened with Afghanistan. The heartbreaking scenes we see in the airport is because, as far as I'm concerned, there was no clear thought out plan to be able to withdraw people. And I would like to say this. Look, as far as I'm concerned, Joe Biden may not have been able to deal with a lot of the things that Trump had already put in place. And remember, Trump has only just said recently that he set Joe Biden up. But I cannot for the life of me understand why. I cannot for the life of me understand why, if America can send 6,000 troops in now, why those thousands of troops could not have been sent in before May 1st to ensure, that this chaos doesn't happen, to ensure that the Taliban does not just swoop in. I do think that Joe Biden made a compelling case as to why America could not remain, but he did not answer the question. This was no longer about why America should stay or leave. This was about, well, if you're going to go, you can't just leave your allies hanging. You can't just leave women, young girls, journalists, activists, those who risk their lives just hanging. And that is what is totally out of place here. And there was no meaningful commitment drawn from the Taliban before America left. So, and this is not just the US, it's also the UK, it's also the UK. So much more needs to be done. And let me just say this, the same people that are pointing hands at Joe Biden, the Republicans, all of them, even in this country, that say, oh no, look at what is happening in Afghanistan, the same people who are going to demonize fleeing Afghan refugees because they don't want Afghan refugees in the UK or in the US.
Is that right, Scotty?
I do want to add one. I do want to add one thing onto what she said. It's not just about Joe Biden, what he's doing in this fact. I think, like I said, we can all agree that soldiers needed to go. The bigger issue on this is why? Why did he not listen to his intelligence? How could you be so blindsided, supposedly, when anybody from the outside looking in? And I don't think America just dumped Afghanistan. I think that's exactly opposite, considering the billions of dollars that we've spent, the 2,300 lives of servicemen and women that we've lost. We're not just dumping Afghanistan. We should have left a long time ago. The question is, why are we doing it so irresponsibly? And you're right. It speaks volume from the fact that our Pentagon, our State Department stood up today and said that they could not go in and rescue these Americans and rescue those that have helped us, for those nationals that have helped us for the last 20 years. I don't believe that to be true. Not with everything that America has been able to accomplish. I guarantee if they wanted to go in there and get those people out of there, they should be able to. And I know they can't. The problem is it's just so disorganized between the State Department, the White House, as well as the Pentagon. Can we get them all in the room? Maybe they get off vacation and actually pay attention to the world and the chaos that they've created by their lack of ability to handle things.
To be fair, Joe Biden did get off his vacation, go to the White House.
He did,
but I don't think it's about an intelligence breakdown, because from what we know of Joe Biden, aside from the fact that he's an empathetic leader, we know for a fact that he does listen to intelligence. I think that he was either grossly misinformed. I think he should have known better, because even the layman on the street knew that the Taliban would swoop in the moment the West, leaves their borders. So I don't buy the whole narrative around, well, you know what, there'll never be a situation where there'll be a helicopter, taking fleeing Americans off the roof. I never bought into that, because that did not make any sense to me. Everybody knew that the Taliban had been empowered in the last 4 years during Trump's presidency, with the photo op, with him basically allowing it to happen.
But my question, stop trying to blame this on Trump.
My question to all of us today is this. If you want to deal with the real issue of the Taliban, it's all well and good, the international community coming together saying that we want to do something about it. Why aren't they doing something about the countries and people who are arming the Taliban, those who are funding the Taliban? How can it be that after 20 years, the Taliban is still running stronger than it did 20 years ago? That makes no sense to me.
The United States are the ones arming the Taliban right now. We left all of those weapons. We left fighter jets. We left planes. We left everything. Instead of, if anything, burn the equipment. Yet we armed them. So that falls on Joe Biden. That has nothing to do with Trump.
No. Listen. I've already said there is no defending the indefensible. I do expect, as far as I'm concerned, that this current administration should have done better in evacuating and withdrawing. But the point here is it did not happen overnight. Let's not overlook that. And I'm saying that I agree that on the ground right now, Americans are the ones basically arming the Taliban. But it's not just Americans. There are other countries, the same countries we shake hands with over the G7, over the United Nations. These are the people and the countries that are arming and incentivizing the Taliban, and we're doing jack all about it. And then people who get to Congress, people who get to, UK Parliament, making all these big speeches, but doing jack all about ending the problem. And that is what we need to do. The Taliban should not be stronger than it was 20 years ago. How is that even possible?
OK, we started with you, Scotty. We've ended with you, Charlotte. That's how it works. It's good to talk to both of you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Heated debate. I wonder what you think at home. Should we have known sooner what was going to happen in Afghanistan? It was red flagged by President Trump, and then we also heard from President Biden. He said that we're going in before the 11th of September. All the troops are being brought home. We saw what happened over the course of 10 days, and then last Sunday when Kabul was taken by the Taliban with little or no resistance. And since then, one of the biggest airlifts since the Second World War taking place to try to get as many people back as possible. Another 300 on aeroplanes, we heard from the Defence Secretary, about to take off to come back to the United Kingdom for a new life here. What about those left behind? More on that to come throughout the course of the day, and also ahead of the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games. A global campaign has been launched to support the 1.2 billion people living with disability. More on that.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. More flares going off, a volley of rocks, cobbles have been pulled up out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. We have now left Italy and entered France. Nobody's asked to check our identity. Made by people who dare to challenge. Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why? Meeting you. Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
It's devastating, actually.
Did you know that if we make small changes to our lives, we can reduce air pollution by loads? But how much? Exactly, loads.
It's another grey and damp morning with spots of rain and drizzle. The light rain may be rather persistent for parts of eastern Scotland and northeast England, noticeably cooler here. Elsewhere, the cloud will slowly break up to reveal brighter spells, but showery rain across Ireland will spread into Wales and later central England, and some of the showers could be on the heavy side. Taking a look at the daily air quality index, where levels of air pollution are bandied from 1 being low to 10 being very high, air pollution levels will remain low at levels 1 to 3.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
1.2 billion people, 15% of the world's population, are people with a disability. Just days before the Tokyo Paralympics, a global campaign has been launched to try to increase awareness and inclusion, as Lisa Dowd reports.
There is just 200 metres between Richard and another gold medal. The Paralympics in Tokyo are almost here, and he wants more than just the perfect run.
We as disabled people need to see to believe it's possible, and that's in all areas of life, whether that's sport, whether that's entertainment, whether that's in the workplace. When we finish our events, when we get our gold medals, we go home and we're still disabled people, and we have so many obstacles and challenges to overcome in life.
Look at you out and about.
You push us all to be better.
You are superheroes.
Really?
Yeah, we're superheroes, all right.
This will be played at the Paralympics opening ceremony to challenge perceptions and drive change. The Paralympics always reminds people of just what is possible, but many Paralympians believe that that moment of appreciation is forgotten all too quickly. Those behind this global campaign say it will last 10 years.
Sport, you still will have them every year, big events, not only the Paralympics, but all the other sectors will be connected as well, because we do want to change legislation in nations. We do want to have more persons with disability in the media, and not only behind the camera, but in front of the camera. We would like to see them in Hollywood. You know, why sometimes you have to bring someone without a disability to play the role of someone with a disability?
I'm going to do tail attack.
Kelly says the fight to change attitudes goes beyond sport.
After the Paralympics, everybody assumes that you're a Paralympian or that you have the desire to be a Paralympian. And that's not always the case. You know, I've never, even from a young age, been really interested in sport or been talented enough to be a Paralympian. However, I'm an entrepreneur. I've got 3 businesses. I've got a family. I love work, and I'm a successful and positive person. And to have yourself pigeonholed so much into like one little box is frustrating at times.
We pray 5 times a day. And no, I'm not praying for a cure. I'm praying for a new handbag.
15% of the world's population are disabled. The We the 15 movement wants to improve the lives of those 1.2 billion people, but they know it'll take time. Lisa Dowd, Sky News.
Of course, we'll be covering the games, I should say, in some detail here on The Breakfast Show on Sky News. Before that, though, we want to talk about what's happening in Afghanistan overnight. We're going to be hearing from our man on the ground very shortly. Headlines for you.
Well, hugely distressing pictures and witnessed by our correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, of babies being thrown over fences in Kabul, a sign of the total desperation of people there, that they want their children to get out even if they can't themselves. Although Ben Wallace told us that the soldiers who are finding it very traumatic there can't take a minor without their parents. So just a sifting operation in Afghanistan and the conditions on the ground being so difficult.